Hydraulic Fracturing in the United States by Alexandra Studevin. Hydraulic fracturing, oil and natural gas. Where are they found? Conventional reserves consist of oil and natural gas deposits that are easily accessible where a simple drill can be used to obtain the resource. Unfortunately, most conventional gases and oils are collected and have already been used. Most of the oil and gases that are left uncollected are unconventional resources. Unconventional sources are much harder to obtain and require extensive effort to collect. Oil and natural gas come from a source rock, and as time progresses, it flows vertically to what is known as a reservoir rock, where oil and natural gas can no longer rise because of a seal rock that is impermeable and prevents the resource from traveling through. Typically, a seal rock consists of shale or salt or unfractured limestone. Without a seal rock, oil and gas would naturally rise to the surface and create oil or gas seeps. How are reservoirs found? Geologists perform seismic surveys to find natural gas and oil reserves. A seismic survey is when sound waves are sent into the ground and bounce back to the source. Geologists are able to tell what rock is underground based on the time it takes sound waves to come back. This information is collected and used to create images of what the ground looks like. These surveys can be done a few different ways, either by small underground explosions or the use of trucks with vibration features that send sound waves down into the ground. Geophones are what collect the seismic wave reflections, and that data is used then to make either two-dimensional or three-dimensional images of what's below ground. What is fracking? Hydraulic fracturing, also known as fracking, is a process that is used to collect oil and natural gas. It has been around since the 1950s, but has become extremely popular in the United States in the 2000s. How are natural gas and oil collected? Hydraulic fracturing uses sand, water, and chemicals to extract oil and natural gas from rock reservoirs. A drill digs down vertically, then once next to a rock reservoir, drills horizontally into the source. Next, a mixture of sand, chemicals, and water are used to fracture the rock. This process creates many cracks in the rock, and as the water is removed, sand is left behind, which allows for the cracks to stay in position, preventing the rock from caving. This allows for gas and oil to be extracted from the cracks in the rock. The good. Reliance on oil and gas. In the U.S., many different sources are used for energy. In the United States, natural gas provides 34% of the energy source, and oil provides 35%. Together combined, oil and natural gas provide 69% of the country's energy source. Shift from coal to natural gas. This boom in natural gas has likely led to the decrease in dependence on coal. Natural gas requires a smaller mass to turn into electricity and has a higher energy output than coal does. Coal has an average of 24 megajoules per kilogram, while oil has an average of 48 megajoules per kilogram, and methane has the best average of 55 megajoules per kilogram. Shifting from coal to methane not only is more efficient, but it also reduces the amount of CO2 released into the atmosphere. The bad. Contamination of water. The process of fracking can cause the release of many different chemicals, some natural, some not. Many of these chemicals involved with fracking are carcinogens and/or endocrine disruptors. After fracking, the water and chemicals used in the process are pumped back deep into the ground and sealed off into wastewater wells. If these chemicals were to leach and contaminate public water sources as well as freshwater sources, it would cause vast public health issues as well as environmental health issues. If water is contaminated by fracking water, it is unable to be treated and no longer usable. It is difficult to determine the exact results of fracking water, contaminating drinking sources or freshwater sources because many oil and gas companies do not publicly release the exact chemicals that make up fracking water. Each company uses its own concoction of chemicals, which then each results in many different effects. This leaves many unknown questions to linger. Why does fracking water contaminate other water sources? How often will this happen? What will happen if someone drinks water contaminated by fracking water? And who will this affect the most? Greenhouse gases. One of the natural gases collected when fracking is methane. When methane is burned in order to produce energy, some of it is polluted into the atmosphere and contributes to greenhouse gases. Not only that, but when methane is burned, it produces carbon dioxide and is released into the atmosphere, similar to the process of burning coal. Methane produces a much smaller amount of CO2 than coal does, but methane is 25% more potent than carbon dioxide when trapping in heat in the atmosphere and is the second most profuse greenhouse gas overall. With the rising temperatures occurring across the world, it is the utmost importance to decrease the number of greenhouse gases being polluted into the atmosphere in order to prevent even larger increases in temperatures around the world. Costs of fracking. Hydraulic fracturing has many large costs that come along with it, one of them being a large energy cost. A lot of energy is needed to create a seismic graph, drill a hole deep enough into the ground, put fracking water into the ground, extract fracking water, extract oil and gas, transport gas and oil, and finally convert oil and gas into energy by burning. Not only is there a large amount of energy needed for the fracking process, but there is also a large necessity of resources for water, chemicals, and sand. Each fracking uses anywhere between 1.5 million to 16 million gallons of water. It also requires between 4 million to 18 million pounds of sand, and finally requires 200,000 liters of chemicals for the fracking water. Earthquakes and wildlife disruption. Fracturing has also been linked to inducing earthquakes and tremors. When water is injected into wastewater wells, it increases the pressure level within the rocks underground. Although it is not linked to larger size earthquakes to which we can feel, it should not be disregarded that it can cause earthquakes and tremors, disruption, and disturbance of wildlife. In order to prepare an area for a fracking site, some destruction may occur. Whether it's removing wildlife or removing native biota, the environment is disturbed by the process. Just the drilling and seismic imaging alone stresses and scares off the wildlife in the area. As stated before, the wastewater can contaminate local freshwater areas, leading to risk and even death of native organisms. Some companies even draw water from nearby freshwater sites to use for fracking, which also in itself disturbs the freshwater life. Fracking in California. California consists of a Monterey Shale, which holds roughly 2/3 of the United States oil shale reserve. Many companies have attempted to locate the oil and gas from these reserves. California is heavily relying on the oil resources both for using and selling. Oil is a finite resource, and if California continues to rely on oil from the Monterey Shale, it will be extremely rough adjustment once the supply runs dry. Because of the environmental risk as well as public health risks, Gavin Newsom, California's current governor, is pushing for the state to ban fracking by 2024. The remedy. Like any other company in the United States, fracking companies are required to follow rules and regulations. These include the Safe Water Drinking Act, Clean Water Act, Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, Comprehensive Environmental Response, Compensation and Liability Act, Emergency Planning, and Community Right to Know Act. All these laws fall under the Environmental Protection Agency, also known as the EPA. The EPA is who, under the federal law, can take action and respond to environmental contamination. Unfortunately, even with all this authority, there are many loopholes that companies can take advantage of, which in turn prevents the EPA from taking action. In order for oil and natural gas companies to fully take the responsibility for negative effects of fracking, new laws are needed to be implemented. Instead of addressing issues once they have happened, like water contamination and wildlife destruction, it needs to be prevented altogether. If a chemical is known to be a carcinogen, it should not be used when there is a risk of contaminating fresh water and drinking water sources. We need laws like these to protect both overall human health as well as environmental health. Even better yet, to prevent such harsh outcomes from fracking itself, fracking should be banned. Its negative traits extremely outweigh its beneficial traits. Removing our dependence on oil and natural gas for energy will help us push towards a greener source of energy, which in turn helps us protect our environment, keeps it healthy, and which in turn provides us a healthy environment to live in. Some states in America have already started to ban fracking. So far, it is banned in 4 states in America, with Washington being the most recent to ban fracking in 2019. Many other states are considering taking this path. For example, California. Gavin Newsom, California's current governor, is pushing for the state to ban fracking by 2024. The rest of the United States should push to be like Washington, New York, Vermont, and Maryland and ban fracking. The takeaway. Fracking's negative traits seem to greatly outweigh its beneficial traits, with it having the risk of drinking water contamination, freshwater contamination, the release of greenhouse gases, risks of earthquakes, disturbance and destruction of wildlife, and high energy costs. All this compared to just using oil and natural gas as our main energy source does not seem like a fair trade. We can either work on creating better laws that prevent such destruction from fracking by making them take accountability, or just altogether ban fracking. For the best interest of humans and the environment, fracking should be dumped and traded in for a more renewable energy source. This concludes my presentation on fracking in the United States. These are my citations. And if there's any questions, please leave them in the comments below.